So today, I would like to tell you that each of us is born into the world as a creative vessel that brings forth something that only our unique self can bring forth. That can get lost in the drama and overwhelmingness that life can bring us. But it doesn't make it any less true. In the past couple of days, I have heard different people say to me, well, I was doing this thing, but it's not original. And I said to them, actually, it is because you're the one doing it. Simply by being the one doing it, it makes it original because what you bring is you. And nobody else can do that. But if you think of it as not original, you could cut yourself off. You go, oh, that's not good enough. That sounds like somebody else. When in fact, it may sound similar, but it can't be the same. And when we start thinking about ourselves as this creativeness, that's actually, we're given these brains, right? We're given these abilities, and it's all around creation. And when we use it that way, when we think of it that way, then all of a sudden we can bring forth things we never even thought we could. Too many times people think about creativity as art, science, music, writing. And it's not like those aren't creative, but so is gardening, cooking, your relationships. In fact, I have found nothing more creative in life than relationships. Because at any moment, you can bring forth into that relationship a conversation, a shift in boundary that has never been there before. That something new can arise in every single relationship simply because you showed up in it. That the possibility is there. But when we don't believe that, we are powerful enough to then not create that. Or at least not see it, because it is my personal opinion that we're creating all the time something new, whether we get to notice it or not. I have heard too many times people saying they don't have the talent to be creative. And I have a very particular story around this, which I've told, but it's been a couple of years, so I'm going to tell you again. When I was 14, I picked up guitar for the first time. And I'm a lefty. And my parents and everybody else said, you can't play lefty, you have to play righty. Because everybody plays righty, you don't get to play lefty. And I worked on it righty for about 6, 7, 8 weeks. And then sat down and played for my grandparents and my dad. And my grandfather looked at me and he said, you have no right to be playing guitar. You have no talent at this. Don't do it. Not a lot of support there. So I didn't. I stopped playing until I was about 17, when all of a sudden, I was so into rock and roll and just so wanted to be a part of that. I picked up the guitar and started playing again. But once again, believed people when they said I should play righty. And I worked at it, and I worked at it, and I worked at it. And I got one of my high school buddies, I was practicing on his guitar. The scratch marks are still there. And finally, one day, he looks at me and goes, maybe you should try lefty. And so we went out and got a really cheap electric guitar, acoustic guitar, turned it over, changed the strings around, and I started playing, and all of a sudden I started making a little headway. Enough so where I wanted to go out and see what this was like if playing live. And so I went out to this bar, open mic at this bar, and got booed off the stage by 3 drunks who were like, "You are terrible." Practiced some more, kept practicing, and then finally got to the point where I was like ready for a real showcase, or at least I thought I was. And so went and played a very famous place in New York City. Improvisation, that's what it was called, the Improv. And after the show, an agent comes backstage to talk to me and says, "You have absolutely no talent at this. But you're cute, so why don't you try acting?" She wanted to get me into acting. But I wanted to stay in rock and roll. So I kept practicing and kept practicing and kept practicing. 7 years later, I'm reading a review in a New York City newspaper that starts out by saying, "What a natural Cliff must be to have played the show he did last night." What a natural. Natural? You're all sitting there thinking maybe you have no talent at something. And maybe you got a lot of feedback like I did that you don't have any talent. It doesn't make it so. Your creative power is so great that if you move forward, if it matters to you, you can bring forth that which you didn't even know was possible. We are this creative power that can bring forth. Now, I didn't ever make it. You've never seen me on the Grammys. I didn't play any stadiums. But I got to a place in myself, in my expression, where I get to play for you guys once a month. Where I get to sit down and write a song that I'm really proud of, whether I play it for anybody or not. And sometimes that's all it is. I wrote a song the other day that I love, and I'm never going to play it for anybody. It was for me. It wasn't for public consumption. And I think we cut ourselves off when we start thinking that if we're going to create something, it has to be for public consumption. When actually, we get to express ourselves because we get to express ourselves. And that by doing so, more comes forth than you may have realized. That's what happened with me around cooking, right? Ash was making all these incredible meals, and I didn't really like them. They weren't my style. And finally, she just said, "Well, then you cook." And I thought, well, I've never really done that, but let me give it a shot. And I found cooking to be incredibly creative. The way I grab pretty much anything that comes to mind and throw it together. I put together a chicken salad the other day. Ash goes, "This is great." She pretty much likes everything I throw together and is happy she's not doing it. And I'm enjoying it. Creative expression. You don't know where you're going to find it. I would have never thought in my life that I would have found it in the kitchen. But you don't know if you're not willing to feel yourself as creative. I mean, that's really the key, right? Is feeling yourself as a creative individual. I've had a lot of practice at this. And so I can sit down and create all kinds of stuff. I create talks for you guys every Sunday. And I'm able to do that without a lot of stress because I know myself to be a creative person. And I've heard some of you say you're such a natural up there, but let me tell you my history around talking. My first center was strictly online. And so I was able to script out my talks and put them right there next to the camera so I could read them. I just read my talks. That's where I started. And I was still so nervous about it. I mean, voice shaking nervous. And we did that with 3-4 years. And then I got the job in Burbank. And when I was in Burbank, I wasn't scripting it out anymore, but I had a podium there with bullet points right there. And I did not stray far from that podium. A couple of years passed, and I started moving a little bit away from it. Then I wound up in Asheville, North Carolina, and was doing, well, then, I was traveling around the country and then was in Asheville, North Carolina, and was doing the talks there, and I didn't need notes anymore. That's when I started to become who you see me as today. But I was still nervous. At one time, I was wearing one of those watches that tell you how fast your heart's going. And it was saying, you're running too fast, you better slow down. And I was just sitting there waiting to do a talk. I didn't wear that watch anymore after that. And then I come here, right? And as it starts to grow and unfold to where people start telling me, you're such a natural at this. It took almost 15 years to become a natural at this. So whatever is brewing in you, number one, it's not too late. And number two, it's your expression. And so what I've noticed is because I allow myself to express, however comes to me to express, I know myself to be a creative person. I don't question it when something else comes up that I'm going to be creative in. It all just fits. It all gives us the possibility to where you start carrying yourself, walking yourself through life. I am a creative person, however it shows up. And so I sit down and I write, or I go to the kitchen and I cook, or I go out to my garden and I play out there. It doesn't matter because I know myself to be a creative person. And that's what you want. You want to know that whatever you walk into, you're a creative person. You get to take what's going on to another level, to making it uniquely yours. And I want you to know that the world needs that gift. Even if you never show it to anybody, the energy itself, the more people who can find themselves being creative people, knowing themselves as that, have a lot less time to go in war or fight others or even judge others' creation. Because that's what happens. One of the things that we do, if we think what we're doing is for consumption, is edit our creation before it fully develops to try to make it something acceptable. And then never give it the chance to fully become what it might. Acceptability is the villain of creative expression, if we're going to have a villain. Most dramas have a villain, so there you have it. And it can, and so creative expression, I said earlier, can be the change of a conversation, the change of a relationship. So Ash and I did a wedding yesterday. We officiated a wedding. of somebody you guys may know, some of you know around here, Suzanne Mortar, and her now husband, Michael Casey. Thank you. Stacy. Michael Stacy. And so one of the things that Ash and I do when we officiate a wedding is we ask for their love stories from each of them. The bride and the groom, or the bride and the bride, or husband and husband. We get their love stories of how they met and what they were doing, what went on there for them, and we don't let them show it to each other. And then we make a talk out of that, to express their love story at their wedding. Now that's fun, right? And so their love stories were incredible because these two knew each other since he was 4 and she was 8. And they had this great story around when they were kids because Suzanne was best friends with Mike's older sister, Jill, where they were trying to stuff him down some laundry chute. And the other sister, Leanne, came over and saved him. And then they go their separate ways and they have, lives that go on. And then they met, they have marriages, kids, divorces, and then they meet again. And so they met and they found themselves to be, because they inside jokes, the way people are who really know each other, best friends. And so that's a really interesting moment because so many people don't want to mess with that. Oh my God, I'm having other feelings, but if I express those, I could wreck the friendship. Editing what's acceptable to acceptability. And then you miss out on the creative moment that's actually there. Because it turns out that true creativity takes courage. Even if you're just sitting there doing it by yourself. You still got to have the courage to do it. But in this case, this was huge. They were best friends. They were having these walks and going and, talking on the phone for like hours and doing all this stuff together and didn't want to mess with it, except they had this creative nudge to mess with it, to see if there was something more there. The courage that took to go beyond what some folks would go, I'm not messing with this. That's my best friend. I want to keep it like that. But one day, Suzanne had the courage to take that next creative step. And that's what it is. And she talked about her heart pounding. How she'd been driving herself neurotically crazy for a couple of days about this. Because she didn't want to wreck their friendship. But she did it. And he was like, thank God you did that because I feel the same way. And they got to move forward from that. That's creativity at its best. That's way better than a hit song. They get to spend the rest of their lives together. Being best friends and lovers. They get to have it all. But to have it all, you got to be willing to have that kind of courage to step up in that level of creativity. So it isn't just about the song, the book, or even cooking. It really does come down to our relationships because that's where we can be the most creative. That's where we can bring something forth that wasn't there a minute ago. That's where we can say, hold on, I know we're having this argument, but why don't we see if we can shift it because I have this new thing to bring. I have this new way of being to bring to it. Or how we relate to work. It's always the boss's fault for how bad work is, or the coworker, that one coworker. Where you are actually the creator, the creative, who has limited your possibilities in terms of what you could bring. And that doesn't mean appeasing that person. I'm talking about being creative. Seeing yourself as a creative person allows your life to show creation. But it starts here. You have to see yourself as that creative to allow it to come forth. Right? And so that's what we're always looking at. That's what I'm always looking at when I'm thinking about whether I'm going to do something or not do something, is can I, in this moment, be the creative here? And of course I always can. It just doesn't feel that way sometimes. We have this, the aspects of consciousness that I've talked about lots in terms of to me, by me, through me, and as me. And they happen all the time, right? We're bouncing around. Somebody does something and we feel it's just been done to me. And then, a moment later, we may get to by me like, I'm going to get that person back. Or I'm going to make this better my way. But there's a creative spot there in it through me that really allows for something new to arise. That the more you believe in, the more it's possible. But the thing about it is you got to feed it first. It wants your feeding, that place of through me, that place of creativity. And the only thing you need to do to feed it is believe in it. That's it. That's all it takes. If you believe that you can be creative right here and now in whatever situation is going on, that feeds it. Now, does that mean immediately you're going to have this aha and life is, and the rainbow's going to show up and the unicorn's going to come riding by? No. No. But the little change, sometimes that creativity is this tiny little thing. It's just this tiny little thing. Like a seed that we plant that then takes watering and sun to grow. And we don't know when it's going to show up. But we are carrying within ourselves an unlimited number of seeds. Unlimited. Good job. Unlimited number of seeds. Whether it's learning a new skill like playing the piano, or it's cooking, gardening, trying something different in the garden, trying something different with your partner, saying something a little differently that maybe you've said before that you could say a touch differently to show a little bit more care. Creative. Maybe it's writing something and allowing your mind to just go crazy with what it writes instead of it having to make any sense. Maybe it's visiting a new place that you've never been before. Trying a new food you've never eaten before. Sitting a little longer in meditation. All those are creative acts. Talking with your boss a touch different than you have before, or your employee. Learning something new about somebody, asking a new question, Want to be really creative? Find a new question to ask that you haven't asked before. And see what that's like. Because if you ask a new question, you're going to get a new answer. It may sound similar to the other answer, but it's to a new question. You are a creative vessel brought forth to bring forth that which is yours to bring, that nobody else can bring. And simply because you're there, it's original. Now, I'm not talking about the law of originality and copyrights and stuff like that. I'm talking about the essence of ourselves and how we cut ourselves off if we think we haven't brought something, what we would consider new. But it's new because you were there, because you're the one doing it. Because if anybody else was doing it, it wouldn't be the same. That kind of creativity is special. And it's a gift. And if you can bring it, you can make life completely different, not just for yourself, but for all of us. I mean, we come together like this to remind ourselves of the powerful, creative, spiritual beings we are. And the word creative is in there because it's part of us. It's who we are. And when we bring that part forth, we are adding something to the world that it's never had before. And that's beautiful for each and every one of us. Thank you. I love you.